No, I didn't move to Australia. This footage was shot by Rob Layton, a great Australian-based mobile journalist and filmmaker. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you definitely should. He's got a lot of really great work to check out. So thank you, Rob, for sharing those clips with me. And the question remains, was that color graded? The answer is no. Looks pretty good, I have to say. But if you did want to color grade it, you could do some subtle tweaks like this. Of course, you could do a stylized grade too, but in this case, I think just subtle corrections look really good. And one important thing I'm doing is de-sharpening, or lowering the sharpness of the image. I do this on all iPhone shot footage. There's different ways to do it. In Premiere Pro, I'm just actually lowering the sharpening, so you're softening the image in essence. And what that does is just really take away a little bit of that digital feel and helps reduce any kind of moire you might get because of the over sharpening of the iPhone. And by the way, you could also do this by using a softening filter while you're shooting. All of that footage was shot ProRes HQ, which looks great, but the files are huge, monstrous in fact. And so what I am finding is that shooting ProRes Proxy looks almost visually identical. You really can't tell them apart. And to prove this, I went out to a lake and I shot ProRes HQ and ProRes Proxy. And so I'll play back this edit I did. I have an A shot and a B shot. Your job is to figure out which is ProRes Proxy and which is ProRes HQ. One thing to note is I did do some basic color correction, kind of like I did on the Australian footage. I also lessened the sharpening, and importantly, I shot all this footage with a variable ND filter. Whenever you hear people say that phone footage looks like, well, phone footage, even ProRes, it's really because they're talking about the over sharpening the phone does and the motion, because most people don't shoot with ND filters. So even though I know which is which, I have a tough time telling them apart. So A was ProRes Proxy. And B was ProRes HQ. Did you get it right? Let me know in the comments if you did. Really, the only way that I've been able to tell them apart is by pixel peeping, which I really don't usually like to do. And really, it's mainly only noticeable on certain types of shots, like this wide shot. There's a lot of fine detail in this image, which ProRes actually helps resolve that. You can see the detail better using this codec, but shooting at a higher bitrate does help, especially when I zoom in here. When you push in here 2 times or 3 times, you start losing detail, obviously, and you see the artifacts. And they are worse on ProRes Proxy. But again, I'm having to really zoom in to see these differences. So again, for everyday kind of shooting, like right now I'm shooting ProRes Proxy on my iPhone 13 Pro Max, you really can't tell the difference except in the file size, and ProRes HQ are huge. Now if you're doing something more important, especially visual effects, like maybe a green screen shot, zooming in on an image, or looking more for that fine detail, then by all means, shoot ProRes HQ. My point is, on a daily grind, daily shooting, those files are too big and the differences just aren't enough. And really what I mean is not only the storage on your phone or your computer, but transferring the files as well. All right, we're gonna test out AirDrop here, and I've got my stopwatch app on my iPhone. This is an 11 Pro Max. Right here is my iPhone 13 Pro Max. I've got a file on here that's 59 seconds, so basically 1 minute, and it is 1.1 gigabytes. So we'll try AirDrop versus connecting the lightning cable. I'm gonna select my Mac Mini. So that was 25 seconds. So now I've got my 13 Pro Max connected to my computer via the lightning cable. Locate the files on the iPhone, I go to FiLMiC Pro and I can drag it across. So that went in 32 seconds, just under 32 seconds. 7 seconds slower than AirDrop. So over time, AirDrop is about 25–30% faster in my experience. Now the only caveat when using AirDrop, I suggest doing 10 clips at a time. If you do more than that, it can pause or stall sometimes. However, for the most part, I would say 99% of the time, it works great for me. By the way, I know there's other filmmakers out there like Philip Bloom, etc., that have had trouble with AirDrop, and they think Lightning is better. That's fine, but not in my experience. And I'm talking about over the years, not just with ProRes. So I would suggest sticking with AirDrop, but as always, test it out for yourself. All right, so now we'll look at dynamic tone mapping, which I think is better shooting ProRes, but it's still there. Dynamic tone mapping is a good thing for still photos. It's not great for video because even when the settings are locked, meaning the exposure, you'll still get subtle shifts and some not so subtle. So first up here is the ultra wide lens. I'll move my hand in front of the camera and then pull it away, and you can see, especially on the edges, that it kind of blooms like I'm adjusting the exposure. It should not do this. Again, it's the iPhone thinking that the shot is changing. It's trying to adjust the dynamic range. Now here is the wide lens, the standard wide, and it is better, I think. It's the most solid and best lens / camera on the iPhone, and it has been for a long time. It's got the widest aperture, etc. But this still does it. Dynamic tone mapping still happens here. And then now the tele lens, and the tele was always the worst. That's the very first lens I noticed doing it back on the iPhone 8 Plus, I think. And again, it is diminished some or minimized some using ProRes, at least to my eye it is. However, it's still there. And when you're doing something, especially on the professional side, where you're not running around with auto settings going, it can be very distracting, and it has ruined a number of shots for me over the years. So Apple, if you're listening, please, please, please allow FiLMiC Pro or whatever app developer to turn this off when shooting video, or at least make it set it once and then it doesn't do it again while the settings are locked. And so this is just something you need to keep a lookout for. There's nothing you can really do about it other than avoid these high contrast, lower light scenarios, or edit around it when you're in post-production. Well, all right, these are my initial pro tips for using ProRes. I've actually got all this information on my website too, on my blog, in what I'm calling a living document, because I'm updating it as I go along here. And so there's a link in the description of this video for you to check that out. And I'll continue to update it, and I'll be sure to let everyone know when that does happen. Shooting with ProRes, you are absolutely getting better quality, but you are also still shooting on a phone. And so there are the various limitations you have to take into account. And of course, you shouldn't shoot ProRes all the time. The files are just too big, even ProRes Proxy. It really just depends on what you're doing. For me, it'll be more of the professional side work I do with my phone. And now with ProRes video, that'll even be more. But if you know what the limitations are going in, it makes them easier to avoid them or fix them later. And ultimately, you'll have a better experience working with your phone, and you'll be happier with the end result.